Well, come on in. It's time for Let's Talk. Listen, hit that share button. Invite someone to come on and be with us tonight. Tonight is really special. Over the last few weeks, I've been hearing about so many people that are dealing with suicide, that are really down and depressed. And I want to address that topic tonight. So just hit that share button, ask a friend to come on and join us tonight on Let's Talk. Good evening, everyone. Listen, we try to bring everything that we believe that you need to hear. We do our best to bring you good topics. This year, we talked about finances, relationships, overcoming offenses, and being able to forgive. Just to name a few things, we have featured business owners, pastors, and couples in ministry. We have celebrated Christian men and women who are committed to their families, communities, and God. We've taken time to honor many blessings that have been given to us. However, we would be remiss if we also didn't take time to acknowledge the fact and the reality that everyone is not ending this year in a good place. Everyone is not thriving in this season. Some are battling, some are frustrated, some are suicidal, some are depressed, some are oppressed. Many suffer what we call the holiday blues. During the holiday season, many people struggle because they've lost loved ones. Think of all the families that has lost someone to COVID. Think of all the families just last week that was rattled by that tornado. And imagine how they are. Here's 2 weeks before Christmas, they're trying to find somewhere to live, somewhere to stay, to make presents for their kids, and all that's going on. During the season, we see people that are married, that are struggling, people that live alone, that want to be married, struggling. Listen, we have to begin to think about what really matters. In our survey on holiday blues, it says 64% say they are affected, and 24% say they are affected a lot. They're really, really struggling, 24%. The holiday blues are temporary feelings of anxiety and depression that can be associated with excess stress. What is the excess stress about? I'm trying to buy gifts that I can't afford. I want to be able to fellowship with people and go out to dinner, not enough money left over at the end of the payday. Expectations have been put on me by my nieces and nephews, my grandkids, that I should do. And so out of all of that, there's the expectations. We're just saying, not this year. Unrealistic expectations, even memories that accompany this season. These feelings often lead to excessive overindulgence. Maybe drinking, eating. Some people overeat a lot during the holidays because they just comfort eat. Some people start drinking. They start with a glass of wine. Before you know it, they've had the bottle of wine. Some people are saying, it's just just not a really bad drink. And they start taking their pina coladas. Well, they got alcohol in it. And before you know it, you're using it to pacify a feeling. Listen, a person who only has a glass or two of wine all year, all of a sudden find themselves during the holiday with the holiday blues, drinking a little more. The season can really set some people on edge. And since our show is called Let's Talk, we have set aside today of this segment to talk about holiday blues and the fact that it's not okay to not be, and in fact, to not be okay. Some people have to say, listen, I'm not okay. It's okay to say I'm not okay. I'm not happy. I thought by now I would have paid off my bills. I didn't think I would come to the end of this year and my credit card would be maxed out. I didn't think I would get to the end of this year and feel this way. I really thought I would have been ahead of the game. But here's my reality. I'm struggling. That's what I'm going to be dealing with on Saturday, the reality of life. That some people are struggling. Everybody's not jumping up and down about Christmas. Everybody's not happy about Christmas. But what do we do with it? We don't turn to the bottle. We don't turn to drugs. We turn to God. And so we've got to understand it's a human nature to grieve, to feel sad, to be angry. But listen, we have to have hope in God. And we as Christians have to provide a platform with open and honest discussion that this thing is real. And how can we help someone with a strategy and a plan to recover and end this year strong? We talk about ending strong. But in reality, is everyone ending strong? Or are there people that are really struggling? Listen, send us up some comments. Let us know where you are this holiday. We want to know how you're feeling. We want to know if you're feeling good. We want to know if you feel like you've accomplished some things. That's what we want you to do. Send us up some notes tonight. Well, we did decide to have a plan of recovery and talk to someone who is really strong in this area. So tonight joining us is Candace Cosgrove, who has been over 15 years working in the field of rehabilitation and treatment of offenders and substance abusers. So let's bring her on tonight and further discuss this topic about the holiday blues. Well, Candice, good evening. Come on in.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
We're good, good, good. Good to have you on tonight. Listen, Candice, just tell our viewers a few minutes a little bit about yourself. Tell us about you.
Okay. Well, like you previously said, I have about 15 years experience working in mental health and substance abuse. I hold undergraduate degrees in criminal justice and human service management. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, where I specialized in clinical mental health. I also have extensive training and experience in substance abuse disorders and addictions. Currently, now I am a director of community services for a local nonprofit drug and alcohol rehab center, where we provide community resources to those who are struggling with substance abuse issues. I operate the outpatient treatment center. Which provides standard outpatient and intensive outpatient treatment to people who are in the community. And I also oversee a certified recovery specialist and certified family recovery specialist program that provides treatment like services, I should say, to individuals struggling with substance abuse issues. So the certified recovery specialists are people who have long-term recovery, so they understand the walk that someone new in recovery is experiencing and can kind of help to guide them along the path. And then the certified family recovery specialist works with the family members of those who are dealing with a substance use disorder. We know that families sometimes deal with the same issues that the person
Mhm.
in addictions is dealing with. They just may not have the resources and they may not be physically abusing a substance, but they still have the same financial, social, environmental issues that come along with substance use disorders. So that's what I've been doing for the past several years. I began as a therapist, mobile therapist out in the community, and now I'm more in an administrative role. Um,
Okay.
that's what I do as of right now.
Wow, that's extensive. Listen, what really brought me to even talk about this tonight is the fact how many families during the holidays, in fact, statistics really show that during the holiday season, many people battle depression. And what they do, even in the church, instead of turning to God, they turn to a substance. Do you all see an increase in that during the holiday time?
So yeah, there's definitely an uptick in substance abuse during the holiday season. I mean, and it's from a myriad of issues. So I'd say like the holidays really are kind of like the perfect storm for substance abuse. You have the stressors that occur with, lack of financial resources, lack of social supports, strained family relationships, just the gathering sometimes of family and friends that may not have the same issues that you have with substance use. So all of those things kind of gather together and, just create this perfect storm for relapse or triggering certain depressive symptoms and issues. So we see a lot of that during the holiday season. Yes.
Wow. They say here that many people who suffer this time of the year from what is called SAD, a seasonal affective disorder, while others deal with what we call holiday blues. What is the difference between SAD and holiday blues when in your field?
Okay. So seasonal affective disorder or SAD is a type of major depression, which is a clinically depressed person. So it has a lot of the psychiatric and in some cases medical symptoms that occur with depression. It's more severe than holiday blues. However, it has a certain time frame associated with it. So we find that seasonal affective disorder happens more so in the fall and winter months where, it gets dark
Dark
early.
earlier. Yeah.
It's cold outside, so people tend to stay in and isolate. And if you don't have a lot of family and friends around you and you're just home alone, those feelings of isolation can cause um, feelings of depression. And, it can display itself in a lot of different ways, substance use, fatigue, chronic fatigue, just withdrawal from, social activities, things like that. So it is a more clinically diagnosed. Um,
So the holiday blues was like, okay, I just don't feel like going out. Just like want to stay. I don't want to be bothered with people. But I'm not as bad. But when you're sad, it actually means that I probably need help.
yes.
I
So
I can't
yeah.
get over this by myself.
Yes. So seasonal affective disorder would require some type of intervention, whether it be, medication or psychiatric or therapy, talk therapy, something like that. Whereas holiday blues, very similar. However, it does have a certain time frame associated to it, which is within that holiday period. And that was kind of some of what I was talking about earlier, where, you have all of these convergences of family and financial and all of these things come together during this very short period of time that adds a lot of additional pressures onto you. And so once you come out of the holiday season, some of that decreases. And for some, it decreases. And I will say honestly, for some, it's a trigger of a more serious depressive episode that may occur. So it's very important to be cognizant of where you're at, like being very self aware of how you're feeling, what you're doing, and what you're going through during that season.
Well, one of the things I heard last year and earlier this year that the COVID caused a lot of depression, a lot of isolation, fear began to cripple many families, and that didn't know what to do with isolation. It affected marriages. It said that household abuse increased during COVID, alcoholism increased. What have you seen in your field regarding COVID and the effects of this that's going on?
So COVID really just exacerbated what had been previously going on. As far as substance abuse and the opioid epidemic, we saw a dramatic uptick in Allegheny County of overdoses during the COVID epidemic. It actually disproportionately affected the Black community, where we saw in Allegheny County, we're like 13% of the population. However, the Black community experienced 22% of the overdose deaths.
Wow.
So it very much disproportionately affected our community. The isolation created people not seeking or receiving resources that they needed. We made this mess in mental health and substance abuse. We made this mess transfer into doing more telehealth, where we were having therapy, via phone or Zooms, where a lot of clients, sometimes if their depression was severe enough, they weren't leaving the house only but to go to therapy or to go to group. That was kind of their social network. Um,
Yeah.
so it just gave, it just kind of catapulted everything that went on.
Wow. Tell me something. Many times there's a stereotype regarding who really can be addicted and who really can be depressed. But as a pastor, I have seen depression across the board. I have seen addiction across the board. There's food addiction, there is drug addiction, there's, like you said, there's opioid, there's crack, there's all kinds, there's alcoholism. I've seen people going to the bar. I've driven by the bar and 7 o'clock in the morning, somebody's pulling up to the bar. I've gone by the state store and I've seen people going to the state store early in the morning, coming up with a brown bag because it's just what they do. And
Mhm.
it's not necessarily somebody in a beat down car. Sometimes it's someone in a nice car. And so in our heads, sometimes we stereotype the people that are battling with this, but that's not the truth. Anybody can go through this.
Right. Substance abuse knows no boundaries, no, socioeconomic. Um, it covers a multitude of people. I have treated clients who started using heroin at 9 years old, and I've also treated clients who were doctors. I've worked with pastors who were in recovery. So it covers a multitude of people, and there's no boundaries to it. I think one of the things that we all have to realize is that we cannot stigmatize someone
Anyone.
for being in, for having substance abuse issues. I mean, it is a chronic disease. There is a disease model to addictions. We don't stigmatize somebody with diabetes who may be predisposed but continues to overeat or overindulge. We don't stigmatize people with hypertension who eat fatty foods and salty foods. And it kind of goes along the same path as those. And it also has the same relapse rate as people with diabetes and hypertension. So I think normalize, and I don't even really want to use the word normalize, but just removing the stigma that there's no condemnation with it, I think is a very important piece for people who are in recovery.
It's so true, because that's why the Lord tells us not to judge one another. Because you know what? I'm battling with one area of my life, someone's battling with another area of their life, and all of us need the grace and the mercy of God. I have watched on social media this last year of how many pastors committed suicide. And in your heart, you're like, well, how can you do that when you really know the Lord? How can
Mhm.
and then you think about it. I've had days, if it wasn't for my family or it wasn't for the Lord, I could have slipped into a dark place because of things that happened in my life. And I thank God for his grace and mercy. I thank God that I do have a tremendous circle of influence around me. But when I think about the people that don't, the people that just really have them, they're just by themselves. And today, we've had even families who have died in their homes for weeks and nobody knew they were gone because no family's checking on them. There's so much of that that's going on. And when I look at the pastors who have committed suicide and their churches couldn't understand and the people couldn't understand, this position is lonely. It really is. If you're not, I have to make sure I go out with people. I have to make sure I fellowship, because I can go behind my desk and for hours study and be just as happy. And before I know it, it's 5 in the afternoon. I'm going to shower and I'm going to bed. I'm not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you're not careful, it can happen to you without even planning it or thinking about it. And so I think what is so critical for us to look at is look around this holiday to see who needs us,
Mhm.
who really has anyone around them. Don't judge them. Don't try to be there like the microscope looking, but to see what can we do to make someone feel better. What can we do? I was talking to someone today and they said, I don't have dinner for the holidays. I said, I got that. I'm making dinner, so I'll make your dinner. What can we do to help someone else that needs us this holiday? It's something I want you to explain to me. Can you explain the brain disorder disease model of addiction? That was interesting when I read about that.
So the disease model of addiction says that addiction or substance use is a chronic pathological disease, which means that it does have a biological predisposition to it. So again, I'm not a medical doctor.
That's okay.
Get into the nitty gritty of it, for lack
Right.
of better words. It basically just says that it is a pathological disease that does have biological functions to it. It rewires brain functioning. It's based off of the compulsion that the individual who has substance use disorder receives. Like, a lot of people who don't understand the disease say, well, why don't you just stop using? Even when, they've
It's like
gone.
when they say, "Why don't you just stop eating?" Yeah,
Right,
right. If
exactly.
we could, we would, right? But we're struggling. We're trying to get,
Exactly.
And when it's not your struggle, you're very quick to judge. Because it's
Exactly.
not your struggle, because you've never had to. There's people who have never had to worry about overeating or had to worry about a weight problem. I see people that are this thin that I watch that how they eat. and I don't eat nowhere close like that, but that's their thing. Then you watch somebody who can have just a glass of wine and they're fine. And then you have somebody that can't have none because if they start with one glass, they're not going to stop. So
Absolutely.
it's so hard to say if you did this or if you just do that. But unless it's your problem, it's
Hmm.
easy to look at somebody else and make a decision. Listen, those of you out there tonight, send us some notes, ask some questions. While we have Candace on the line tonight, tell us about what's going on with you. Don't be afraid to hold back. Let us know about the holiday blues in your family and reach out to us and tell us something. I want to ask you about this. It, listen, I looked at your resume. You're licensed as a dual counselor. You've worked in so many multiple facets of the field. What area are you most passionate about?
So I'm not actually licensed. I will say that I just have extensive experience working in the field, but I moved into administration, so I never really got licensed, but I am a master's level therapist. Um, However, I'm most passionate about working with women and families in recovery. I think we know that, mothers are primarily the glue that holds the family together,
Okay.
in my opinion. Um, so when you see a mother, and I work at Jubilee actually is doing a donation for them right now, Sojourner House, for
Yes.
many years. And so Sojourner House is one of few organizations that mothers are allowed to come into treatment with their children, which is huge because it limits the disruption of the family unit, which is so important and so critical, not only to the child, but to the mother as well. Having worked in treatment centers where their children weren't allowed, that was one of the main stressors, or one of the main reasons why people left rehab, is because they felt as though they had to get back to their kids. And, you know, they thought it was taking too long to get back to their children. So working with mothers and children and families in recovery, I think is what I'm most passionate about. When you see a family who has suffered some of the things that I've seen, be able to reunite and be healthy and be fully functioning, it's the best feeling.
Wow. And so somewhere like the Sojourner House where they have mother, how do the kids go to school and how are they able to work all of that out being in a program like that?
So there is a law called the McKinney-Vento law. So if the mother is in a treatment program, or the child is in foster care or something like that, in order not to cause a disruption in the child's education, they are able to go to whatever school district they're associated.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, in some cases, the children will return to the school district wherever the mother was living prior to coming in treatment, and the bus has to come and pick them up and take them and bring them back. In a lot of cases, if you're, located wherever you're located, and there's a school district, the mother goes, signs them up, the bus picks the children up, takes them to school. For children who are below school age, there was a daycare center right in the facility. So while the mother was in treatment all day, the children were in daycare. They would take a breakout lunch around 12 o'clock. Mom would come and get them, take them upstairs. They had their own apartments. Mom would take them upstairs, feed them lunch, bring them back downstairs. And they had like a whole routine and schedule and homework and everything else that goes
So
along.
that worked out. That made it so much easier. Tell
Yes.
me something. Do you find that women rehab different to men? Because women usually, sometimes they have the kids. The men don't normally have the kids.
Right,
So
right.
what's the rehab like that between men and women?
So for women, I would say it is a little bit more stressful at times because they do worry about their children. So there's an additional level of stress that goes along with it. Whereas men, I'm not going to say that men don't have the same stress about their children. However, there aren't a lot of rehab centers that allow men to bring their children with them. So they don't have that constant. They are able to kind of focus on themselves as long as, they know that their children are safe somewhere. So that's kind of the difference that you see, whereas men can be more so focused on themselves. So one of the things that, I see right now is that working with the men that we work with, they're more focused on employment, um,
Okay, yeah,
getting themselves stable again, housing, things like that. Whereas women are more concerned about, okay, where are my children? How do I get reunited? If there's CYF involvement, what's the reunification process looking like? And then some of the other things that men may be dealing with primarily are secondary factors for women, like working and things like that. However, I will say recently I've been seeing a lot more men reunifying with their children while in
right.
treatment. And that's become a big thing that I've been seeing recently.
How do you think the children are coping with these holiday blues when their parents are addicted? Here's Christmas. And I
Mhm.
know one of the things we do, like I said, we sponsor the Sojourner House every year. We make sure that the women have things. We've been working with Sojourner quite some time. And we also want to make sure they have toys and everything. But how do children cope with the holiday blues?
So you see a wide range of behaviors from children, everything from aggression. You see depressive withdrawal symptoms, just withdrawing from activities. Um, you see, the fighting, the, disrespectful language, things like that. So you see a lot of different symptoms and behaviors of how children deal with it. Um, so you know, we always say children are resilient, and they are for the most part. Once we, reestablish a healthy family unit, they are able to return to some sense of normalcy. However, what I will say is that some of the trauma that they experienced during the time where their parents may have been in active addiction kind of rewires their brain thinking, so their brain patterns. So even though they've returned to what seems normal, we don't know what actually would have ever been normal because, their brain patterns have changed so dramatically due to the trauma they've experienced.
Wow. This is something that really I have seen, even as a pastor, the grandparents that take the children. I've seen, I remember one of our members had her granddaughter, and her daughter was addicted, and she had her granddaughter, and she was going to adopt her granddaughter. And I remember her putting her in my hand. The baby was that small because she was born into the drug addiction, and now today she's a grown adult. But I remember her putting her in my hand, and I baptized her, blessed her. But how do you see that with the families, that the damage that is done, and what support is there for those grandmothers that are taking the children and are raising them while their children is in the recovery and trying to get over this drug addiction?
Right. So, depending on what happened with the family, if there's CYF involvement, there should be some level of supports through CYF for the family that takes on the child. I was speaking earlier about the certified family recovery specialist
Okay.
that we have, and the family recovery specialist or someone who may not have never used any substances. They just may have been a family member of someone who had a substance use disorder. So what happens is that they have that shared life experience of dealing with, taking on grandkids, taking on nieces and nephews, things like that. So they help support and walk them through those things. The good thing about Allegheny County is that we are very much a resource rich county where there are resources practically everywhere if you know how to access them. And one of the things is that, and one of the things that I'm also passionate about is access to resources, especially for our community. So knowing how to access those resources, they're out there. There's everything from uh, getting Pampers and playpens and high chairs to assisting them with legal issues, financial issues. It's just being able to access those resources.
And it's funny you say that you're talking about the resources. We just talked about that, being able to put a resource center together where one call and you can tell someone where to find Pampers, where's the best food banks, where to get money if they need a playpen. Is there money available for a woman who's been in an abusive situation to get her into a hotel or get her into a center? And it's just it's so right. We really need resource centers. The church has got to become a resource center for many of the people that are battling with these things. And I've seen it as a pastor. We get those calls. Right now, we have families that are waiting for toys, waiting for things for the holidays. But we get those calls from women that, like, Pastor, I'm in an abusive situation. I have nowhere to stay. Mm-hmm. And what do you say to them? You say we can put them in a hotel, but we can't do that long term. Mm-hmm. And so our resources are just so critical. So tell us about some of the resources we can even find in Allegheny County.
So like I said, we are a very resource-rich county. So there's everything from, like I was saying, getting the Pampers to shelters. One of the things that has been, I would say, an issue in our county is that if you have like a homelessness issue or a shelter issue, is going through a service called Allegheny Link, and it's a service that you call, and they set you up with whatever shelter you need in the area. Sometimes it can be very much the next day. It could take a couple of days. So I think it would be important for us to understand that in that meantime, for those resources to kick in, how do we support them in the meantime? But we, like I said, wow, there's an area of resources at Allegheny. I'm just trying to think of some
of them. That's fine. That's plenty right there. And that's one of the things we're trying to build here at Jubilee, is a resource center for people, because we see the need. We have one of the grandmothers on the line, and she says, listen, I've been raising 3 grandchildren. I adopted them years ago. And here's what we're just talking about. Grandparents that are having to raise their grandkids now. They've raised their kids and they thought, well, I'm going to be enjoying life now, and they have to start all over again. Are there support systems for those people? And not just as far as monies go, but where do they get the kind of support? Would they have something like that here or nationwide where people can get support that are trying to raise kids all over again?
Yes, there definitely is. I can't think of the name of the organization off the top of my head. However, if you have her information, I will get her the information that she needs. But there definitely are. There support groups. Again, one of the services that my agency offers helps wrap around the grandparents or family members as well. A lot of, if she went through an adoption agency, if she adopted her grandchildren, she went through the adoption agency. I'm not sure how long the process has been, but the agency also should offer additional supports as well. But I can get her information if needed.
Yes. All right. Well, I know who that is, so we can definitely reach out to her. Listen, this is something I want to ask you. Do those who go through treatment normally sustain long-term recovery, or do you find they relapse?
So everybody's journey is different. What I will say is what I've seen in my time is that it depends on where you're at. I go from the stance that there's no such thing as rock bottom. And I know rock bottom is like a term that's been used, throughout the years, but I don't believe that there's any such thing as rock bottom. Rock bottom is when you don't wake up the next day. Every day that you draw a breath, you have a chance to move forward. So with that being said, I think that new people who are newly in recovery do have a greater chance of relapse if they don't have the supports and the interventions that they need in place. So there's multiple paths to recovery. We all know the traditional NA, AA, but there's medicated assisted therapies now. There's different types of talk therapy, smart recovery. So finding what works for you is very important as well. But you have to have that support and that community to wrap around you for anybody to be successful and to sustain long-term recovery.
Tell me something. How can the church help? And when you talk about the community and the support and the wraparound, how,
Mhm.
as a ministry, can we help those that are in our congregation or those that are in the church that they don't wind up being depressed this holiday? They don't wind up being alone. How can we reach out and let them know what can we put around them? What resources can we put around these people that really need us as a church?
Mhm. So I would say, as a church, it's very important to understand the need for community and for fellowship. Again, we cannot have that sense of condemnation and that sense of judgment because everybody's going through something. So having that support, having that supportive person, be it the pastor, be it another member of the church that you can reach out to, that you can talk to, having just and it takes a lot of the person as well to fully to fully immerse themselves in the church as well too. You
Because
know,
some of them are
be a
struggling with
right
trust. Do you think like some of them are struggling with trust issues?
trust
You
issues.
know,
Yes.
they feel like you might condemn them, so they're kind of leery too of church because we can be really religious. We can be really we can be a little bit dogmatic at times in the church because like we feel like we have arrived. And then when somebody walks in that don't smell quite right, or you can smell the alcohol in there, we don't even know how to handle that because we haven't been around that. So we also have to be very careful and not to reject someone just because we don't understand or it's not what we're accustomed to. Because people say don't forget your BC days, before Christ. You had your stuff too. But to tell you the truth, there's a lot of stuff in my BC days I don't remember. It's been over 30 years. And so when somebody walks in and they when you reach them, they smell of alcohol, or you can smell they smell like a train or something coming. You have to catch yourself so you don't make them feel uncomfortable. But
Absolutely.
if you've been away from that kind of life for a while, sometimes you
Mhm,
don't really mean to.
mhm,
But I
mhm.
know I know sometimes when I'm working the altar and somebody smells of cigarette or someone smells of alcohol, I have to catch myself that I don't show any kind of like
Mhm.
so you don't smell right or whatever. But but it's the truth because I've been so long away from it, and I was never a drinker. My dad was. But
Mhm.
if I had a glass of wine, that was it for me. I was out after that. I am not a drinker at all. But there's family members who do drink. And one of the things I said to my children and even to my son, I said, one of my concerns is that as a family, there's alcoholism in my family. And we know that there's things that run generationally. We know that. And
Mhm.
so my dad was a very strong alcoholic. My dad was drunk. My dad, I mean, he was a functional drunk though, because my dad was a well-known police officer, high ranking in the police force. But then when he went to drinking, he was in a whole different world. So I'd always say to my sons, I'm like, it runs in our family. What I don't want you all to do is drink. And then when life crisis comes at you, or trauma or something comes in your life that you're not expecting, instead of turning to God, you turn to the alcohol.
Mhm.
Because I've
Mhm.
seen people do that. I've seen people that
Absolutely.
when they hit a hard place in life, instead of running to God, the first thing they do is they take a glass of wine, then they take another glass of wine, and then before you know it, they're
Mhm.
getting up drinking a glass of wine. And
Mhm.
it's all because when the crisis came, they didn't have the right resources, they didn't have the right mindset to run to God. Me, in a heartbeat, as soon as something come up, I'm bawling. I am shut down in the cupboard. God, I want to talk to you. But everybody's not that way, and we have to be mindful of that. So I just wanted you to kind of just give us some idea about that. But here's what I want you to answer for me. What do you say to someone who's in denial regarding their addiction and their depression? Because people will say, I'm fine. I'm
Mhm.
fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm
Mhm.
fine. And the bottom
Mhm.
line, you can look at them and say, man, you depressed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Your eyes are dark, your hair's not done, you look like you haven't showered, and you're telling me you're fine. What
Mhm.
tell us something that people that are in denial.
And so, you know what? So in those cases, and you know something's going on, I think it's more important just to show the humanity in you. Like, okay, well, let's go to dinner. You know what I mean? What are you doing tonight? Let's go to dinner. You know what I mean? Want to come to church with me on Sunday? I think it's just more so not pressing the issue, because then you find people will run, like, oh, I gotta stay away from her, she's gonna keep asking me what's wrong with me. You know what I mean? Instead of letting people naturally evolve to tell you what's going on. I have sat in counseling sessions where, me and a client have just sat in silence for 10,
Okay.
15 minutes, where it's just like, okay, well, you say nothing's going on, just tell me about your day. You know what I mean? What did you do today? I mean, I think it's just being human, just being authentic, and letting people see. I'm not saying you have to tell your whole life story, but letting people see what's going on with you too, and let them know that everything's not perfect with me either. um
Okay.
so you know what I mean. And I think some of the things that keep some people away from the church, and it kept me away from the church a little bit, is that feeling of judgment. Like, if I tell you what's really going on with me, you're
Yeah.
going to just, turn your back on me.
Right.
So instead of, me being human and me showing that I'm a flawed person, um,
And we all are. And that's
ex-
the thing with church, we all are flawed. One of the things I've been doing deliverance in over 30 years here in the city of Pittsburgh, and people come from all around other cities and stuff for deliverance and for healing time. But every one of us, if it's not for the grace of God, all of us,
all of us.
all of us would be on the news. I mean, all of us, because when you think of all the things you've gone through, the hurts it really, Candace, to me, is God's grace and God's mercy that I'm sitting here today. I come from an alcoholic father. I come from an abusive home. My mother was dead by 35. She was mentally, physically, and emotionally abused. I know what that's like. When my mother died, my father turned on me, and I was abused as a daughter. And so when I look back over my life, I could be a statistic. I too could be out there, because I remember the anger. I remember the mad at my dad. There's times I thought about what could I put in this drink so you don't wake up in the morning, because I know when he wake up, he's going to hit me. I know when he's wake up, so when you're born in that kind of sometimes abusive relationship, you'll be surprised what kind of things you do. Sister Addie online is saying to us, she said, I need a counselor, a Christian counselor for my grandchildren. And so that's somebody we may need to reach out to. She's in Atlanta, Georgia, though. So I don't know if we have somebody that can maybe do Zoom with them. But she's the one that adopted her grandchildren. And she's saying that she could use some help with a Christian counselor. So we're going to make sure at the end that we reach out to her and just get back on what she's asking. Listen, do you notice an increase in suicide rate during the holiday? I just took a call yesterday that young man had a fight with his girlfriend and he committed suicide last night. The family came home and found him hanging in the house over a fight. Him and his girlfriend had a fight. Something happened. He hung himself. Can you imagine the family's Christmas? What do you see this time of year regarding that?
So, I don't deal too much with suicide. I kind of deal with the attempters.
Yeah.
And I see it in the after appearance of it. However, what I was reading recently is that suicide rates don't necessarily increase during the holiday season.
Here we go.
The attempts, um, or the ideations, verbalizing that, you want to commit suicide may, increase during this season.
Okay.
I think, again, like we talked about, it's a matter of support and wrapping around, and who do you have that you trust, that you can talk to, um, and being able to verbalize those things, and having somebody who is not going to judge, and who is not going to who is going to show up for you. And I think that is a big issue with a lot of the things that we deal with, like, who is really going to show up for me. If I make that call and say, hey, I'm just feeling like I'm just, it's over. I don't want to do this anymore. Who's going to show up for me? Who's going to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive to my
Yeah.
house, pray with me, or take me to the emergency room, or whatever needs to be done? And who is it that's going to just be like, oh man, you'll be all right. Just get some sleep in. You know what I mean? Call me
That's
in the
true.
morning. You know what I mean? And we get and
Right.
we get that a lot. You know what I mean? So you have to know who is actually going to show up for you.
But listen, here's what I want to ask you. You're
Mhm.
dealing well, so it's similar like me. You're not pastoring, but every day you're listening to these scenarios. Every day you're hearing about other people's issues. How does Candice protect her mental health? And how can we help you making sure you're okay during the hospital after you've been dumped on and spoken to and you've had to hear all these scenarios? How do we help you stay strong?
So what I'll say is that I've dealt with depression for a very long time, on and off. Um, Actually, by the grace of God, I'm here today. Like 5 years ago, I was hospitalized with a psychiatric disorder for several months. And like I said, by the grace of God, He asked me to choose life or death, and I chose life. And I'm here today to be able to talk about that. And in that journey, um, I've relied on prayer, getting my eating right, and exercise. Those are my three things. Medications never work for me. Just, prayer and eating right and exercise. As far as supporting me, is that I have people that I reach out to. I have a weekly phone call with two friends that just reinvigorates me. We talk about everything from scriptures to the latest TV show to watch this sermon on YouTube. That just, gives me life again. I try to, with my own staff, I try to create a team where we're able to be honest with each other. If we're feeling burnt out, if we're feeling like, I don't know how to deal with this situation or this client, that we, talk and speak to each other. And then I have a very close knit family. So, I always say, like, if somebody sneezes, somebody down the street is going to say, God bless you, because that's how close my family is. Um, so, those are the things that I kind of rely on. I will say Jubilee has been a blessing to me for the last couple months that I've been attending. I'm on the prayer line every morning. I just feel like being covered in prayer in the morning before I go into the office has been a blessing to me as well. So I think that's where I'm at with it right now. Um,
Good.
yeah, and just having people, like, again, it's that wraparound thing, having people that can be supportive, people that I know I can call and can count on. I have friends, I have family, and that's just kind of
Well,
where.
well, we want to be here for you too. We're just a phone call away. We definitely want to be here, and we just love having you as a part of our ministry and what you bring to the table. Listen, how does faith play a role in you? Are you allowed to use any kind of scripture base, and what can you do and cannot do in the field that you are regarding your faith? Because I know you love God. I've watched your walk over the last few months, and it doesn't take a minute for you to start weeping in the presence of God and enjoying the Lord. But can are you able to take any of that into your field, or do you have to really go by the book?
So I have been blessed over the years to work in organizations that understand that my faith is incorporated in everything that I do. It's something that I literally tell people in interviews. And I know not everybody shares the same faith as
Right.
me. So I'm very cognizant of that. Working in addictions, the standard for addictions over years has been 12-step NAAA, which is a faith-based program. It's based off the spiritual principles of love, hope, faith, fellowship, community. So being able to incorporate those principles into my work only grows my faith and helps to share my faith with others. For people who may not share the same faith as me, I feel like it's planting seeds because I do
Okay.
work off of the principles. So as I'm working off the principles, I feel like I'm just planting those seeds. I'm planting those seeds of faith, and sometimes they do come back, and sometimes I know that they're just out there waiting to grow.
Wow. Tell me something here. Do you see yourself, where do you see yourself as far as ministry wise over the next maybe 2 to 3 years? I know this is your career, but
Mhm.
how are you going to incorporate what you do in your career in ministry? How do you see yourself transitioning in that?
So what I do, I say is a calling. It's not necessarily career. Um, I I take this as my ministry, what I
Okay.
do.
Okay.
In the next few years, I hope to be, you know, working, if not full time working in the ministry, working more so in the ministry than the capacity I am right now, within the church. Um, and other than that, I really don't know, honestly. I Jeremiah 29:11, he knows the plans he has for me. And so right now, I'm not gonna question it. I
Yes.
honestly couldn't tell you. I only know, like, I hope to grow deeper in my faith, work deeper in ministry, in the church, and all of those things.
How important is self-care to you, to other women your age? How important do you find yourself sharing with your peers about self-care, especially seeing all that you see?
Right. Self-care is extremely important. If you can't take care of there's a social worker saying that if you can't take care of anybody else if you don't take care of yourself first. So like I said before, just having those connections with people, watching what you eat. Over the last year and a half, I have been on this thing about sugar. And I call sugar the devil right now. Um, and
Yes.
it really is. And I tell people, especially people who are dealing with it, to just go back to this for a minute, especially people who are dealing with substance abuse and depressive symptoms, um, sugar breaks down in the carbs, and it just throws your whole
Holds things off.
system.
I've been this today's my 14th day without sugar. 14
Congratulations.
days without sugar. I One of the decisions I made on December 1st was to give up sugar and starch. I don't do any breads and I don't do any sweets. It's my 14th day. And a couple of days ago I was feeling like something's wrong. I feel like I'm falling out. I feel like my head
Mhm,
is in a cloud. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And then I realized, Connie, you haven't had sugar in 14 days. No
mhm,
form of sugar. Haven't had any sugar, and a lot of water and stuff like that. And I'm like,
mhm,
that's what it is. My body is realizing I'm not giving it because I was feeling like my head was in a cloud.
mhm.
And I'm like, something's wrong with me. And I realized, no, your body is actually really starting to tell you something. I haven't
Absolutely.
had any rice, no potatoes. I've had not had. I'm doing a 40 day. I'm doing a 40
Mhm,
days. I'm in the presence of the Lord, and the things that I gave up was red meats, bread, and sweets. Those are the three things that I gave up. I still do like turkey. I still do like fish, and
mhm,
vegetables. But
mhm,
I'm the person in the morning. I would have to have bread. I'd have to have bread, and so even if it's just toast and coffee. And for 14 days, I said, you know what, God, I want to not only begin strong, but I want to end strong. And I
mhm,
want to really, because my thing is in the morning, I have to have my coffee with my sugar in it, I got to have my toast in it. And I'm sitting there, I said, Connie, you can do without that. But the struggle was so hard, because you're kind of set in your ways. But
mhm,
this is my 14th day. And you know what I had to do it? I had to get a coach.
mhm.
I
Whatever
had to
works.
get a coach. I had to get a coach. I said, you know what? Every year I start strong in January and I do it then. But I said, this year, I'm going to tell the enemy, just like you say, this sugar is the devil.
It is. It
I
throws
said,
me,
you're the
and it
devil.
throws me. Yeah,
I'm
it
not
throws
coming
me
in the new year
totally
with
off.
you, and I'm coming out of this year without you, and I'm coming in the new year without you. And I'm so determined to do that. And I'm just so determined because, like you said, self care. But for a long time, for me, my comfort, whenever I'm struggling, my comfort was eating. That was my way of my coping mechanism, I should say, was eating, I would have a slice of cake and a cup of tea. That I felt, oh, I'm fine. One slice of cake is not going to bother anybody. But when you're already overweight, one slice of cake is too much. And so the battle began with that. So that's why I can understand what you're saying regarding the sugar and everything else. And one of the main causes dealing with cancer is sugar. Everywhere we go, they talk to me about that. When my husband was battling it with cancer, that's one of the things they said too. So it's just really just taking your whole life and saying, you know what, you can do without it. You really can. You know, the enemy will make you believe that you can't do without certain things. You're denying yourself. And what was so funny is that this weekend, one of my daughters graduated. She had cake there. Then my daughter-in-law had a birthday party. She had cake there. And all weekend I was surrounded by birthday cake from my favorite places. And I heard myself say to myself, so what you gonna do? And I had to really say to myself, you're not going to touch it. You made a decision to stay and be honest with yourself. You have to have that self-talk. I had to have that self-talk with me because I know I had to talk to my coach that night. And then one of my coaches was at the table and they were eating cake. And I was like, you eating the cake in front of me? But I was just so determined, and I'm grateful just to be able to stay on the journey. And I've asked God to give me this journey for 1 year, to walk away from sugar, to walk away from the carbs. And I might incorporate some carbs. It depends on what my coach says. I might incorporate a little bit of it, but it's a journey. And it's like any other addiction, whether it's food addiction, whether it's shopping addiction, drug addiction, whatever it is. What I really believe in my heart is every now and again, we need to sit down and have a self-talk to ourselves. Like you said, you had gone through those places where you hit the low points. I've gone to places where I've hit the low points. And we have to get to a place where we realize if we can't be honest with God, a lot of times we hit bottom or hit those places because we're not being honest with God.
Right.
We don't want to talk to him about, I don't want to talk to God about my addiction with food. I don't want to talk to God about my addiction with wine, whatever your addiction is, because you really feel, well, God already knows, but he wants to hear what you want to do with it. Are you okay to spend? And one of the things that really get me, Candace, I am so determined to travel. I love to travel. Anybody know I love to go. And you know what I think about? If I get on the plane and I don't fit in the seat, oh my God, they might put me off the plane. That's the first thing I think about. I won't be able to travel. I remember on that movie, Why Did I Get Married? They put her on the plane because she couldn't fit the seat. And I said to myself, that would be horrible to get to the airport and you're getting ready to fly and you can't get on the seat because you made a decision not to change. And so thank you so much. I know I've got to go. Thank you. I really appreciate you being with me. I'm looking forward to working with you over this next months, these next few years, what God has called us to do together. But thank you so much for sharing those. And listen, we're going to put the numbers up. If there's anyone you need to call, anyone struggling with addiction, we have numbers. Candace has given us the numbers. We're going to post it, Candace, and we're going to begin to share some. Anyone needs to call, and I'll let Sister Addie know that we'll give her a call sometime this week regarding that. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you.
Well, you heard us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was good. It was good. It was rich. I realize why I'm on this journey. It's been one of the toughest journeys for me. For years, I have battled with, most of you know, weight. Anybody that knows me knows that. And to make a decision to work on it and work on it many times and fail, and to really say no. When I had a financial problem, I got a coach. And this time I've asked my coach, stay with me. And I've given him a list of things that I want to accomplish in this next few months as I take this journey. It's not an easy journey. And I'm just believing God to finish my journey strong. I want to finish the year strong and begin 2022 even stronger. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Let's be real. Let's be transparent. You know, if we're not open before God and share with people what really is going on in our lives, we make it look like we have it all together. We don't have it all together. I know I don't. None of us do. Only the Lord is the one that has it all together. That's why I lean and depend on him. Thank you tonight for joining me on Let's Talk. God bless you.